Hey guys, GhazzyTV here with another YouTube video build guide. Today we're going to talk about Dark Pact, and it's inspired by a Reddit post made by Raweon. Might not pronounce that name correctly, Raweon. So he made a Reddit post about this build, and what we did is we've taken that build and we made a very achievable solo self-found state low budget version, which I'll be quickly going through at the end of this video. And I decided to tweak up and improve the high budget version. And there's a few things I want to talk about. So I'm going to show the build on Uber Elder because it's harder than Awakener. Clearing has been very smooth, so I'm going to do a map clear with it as well. But before we do that, I'm going to talk about a couple of mechanics. So let's just move to the side so you guys can see. First off, there's a few different options you can do. You can go with pretty much any belt. I went with Torrent's Reclamation because I believe this is pretty much one of the best belts you can use for minion builds. And it's really good for this build as well. So the high budget version is doing about 110 million Shaper DPS in the POB. It is slightly inflated, so I'll explain what I mean with that in a bit. So the way the mechanic works is that Dark Pact then consumes HP to deal chaos damage, and we use this on skeletons. So the idea is to scale the HP of our skeletons up as much as we can, which we're doing. The HP of our current skeletons, I haven't leveled my gems up, so they're pretty low on some of the gems. But my skeleton's HP is about 41,000. They're going to land on about 43,000 with this gear when the build is when the gems are leveled up. So basically the mechanic is that you summon skeletons and then you cast Dark Pact, and then that will chain for the amount of chain effects that I have. So each cast will hit 6 times with Awakened Chain. So that's why the DPS is a bit inflated, because the only way to calculate this is to add 500% more damage to see the actual damage you'll be doing per cast, because each cast will chain 6 times. However, these chaining last about a second, so each cast will then have to require to be doing damage for 1 second before that cast has done all its damage. That's why the DPS is slightly inflated, just so I have that said. I'm not going to talk about the gear until after I've showed you the gameplay, but the mechanic of clearing with this is basically casting skeletons and then casting Dark Pact, and it will kill everything. And the way we do this is by putting the skeletons in a helmet like this, with Empower to scale their level for HP, Minion Life to again scale their HP, but most importantly, Feeding Frenzy. This allows the skeletons to pretty much dash and charge into enemies, so that you summon skeletons and then you'll just put your Dark Pact up and they will just run over enemies and hit them, and that's the best way to do it. And that allows you to basically summon skeletons and then cast once and move on from there. Another good thing is that we have Convocation on a trigger, not that it matters too much in general, because your skeletons will not be moving. Besides that, we have one trigger weapon, which causes a bit of issues when it comes to the weapons crafting, because one of the weapons is with a trigger and the other is not. But again, we're going to go through the details of the gear. I will also go through how I crafted it and how insanely annoying that is, because everything on this build has been crafted except the belt and my unique flask. Everything has been crafted from the ground up, and that was terrible. It was not very hard, but it took a very long time to do. So I'm going to start showing this build off versus Uber Elder, and you guys can see the DPS, how it looks, and then we'll do a clearing map as well to showcase that. Rings were troublesome to craft, very annoying, but then again, you can settle with much less DPS than what this build is doing and still do very well. The low budget version of this is still doing several millions of Shaper DPS, and you can do that in solo self, and it's very comfortable. So for bossing, we basically just smack out our skeletons, make sure you have an enduring mana flask, and as soon as they become attackable, this is going to happen to them. Okay, that's the first phase on him, and that's the first phase on him, and you're done. The build is really, really tanky, like super tanky. It looks much squishier than it is, simply for the fact that you only have your HP and your energy shield as your effective HP, but this build has max spell block and max, well, almost max spell block with a few percent lacking, and max block to attacks with glancing blows on top of that, and an insane amount of sustain. First off, I have a leech that is affecting my, oh, I forgot the flask. My leech is affecting my my energy shield when I'm on full HP, and on top of that I have about 2,000 energy shield per second. That is also achieved thanks to energy shield on hit with this version. The lower body version would not have the ES on hit, but would have the leeching going on. So when it comes to bosses like this, it's very crucial. As you notice, I stopped doing damage there for a few seconds, and that is because I didn't have any... I didn't have my Enduring Mana Flask ready, which is basically very crucial for you to do damage, and that's because I'm over-clicking my Enduring Mana Flask. So you just gotta be a little bit careful not to over-summon it, because then you'll lose your damage, or your damage output. It's not too bad, because pretty much any cast will kill everything, so you don't have to be doing consistent cast on all the time with the build to kill everything. So that's pretty fine. Raweon was showing this on his Ready post when he did a build like this, which is very similar to the way I approached it. But he did a tier 19 100% Delirium map with this build, Deathless. So again, it looks much squishier than it is. And that's it. It's very simple to do this fight. So I'm going to show you some map clearing before we go in detail with the gearing and the skill tree. Hopefully we get a jewel now. For the video, let's go! Oh. I don't want that. So, I'm going to show you a map real quickly. So we'll pick up a tier 16 of some sort. Let's do a Forge of the Phoenix. Might as well. Can't Region is the only map mod that is annoying to do. Still doable, but annoying. So let's do a non-hexproof as well. This seems fine. Yeah, it seems fine. And we'll do this. And we need to do some Nico because we start delving with with a little bit of a project we're doing. We're going to bring down to as low depth as we can, hopefully hitting 6,000 on a Spectre build on the stream in the coming days. So clearing, I'm going to see if I can show you as soon as an enemy pack shows up. So basically, if I put skeletons here, they will rush in here. Same thing here. So as you can see, they're immediately dashing into the enemies. I click Dark Pact once, and they will basically run with that Dark Pact into the enemies. So that's how the clearing works. So it feels very weird to clear with the ability, but since it's so tanky, I'm able to just consistently dash in with a Flame Dash into packs, not without worrying too much, and just use the skeletons once if I don't have any there, and just click Dark Pact once per pack, which is very comfortable to do. So the clearing feels weird, but once you get used to it, it's really nice. Not the best clearing build in the game, I can tell you that much, but it's been very comfortable to play, and together with Torrent's Reclamation, it helps a lot when it comes to the action speed for mobility, the CDR for your Flame Dash. There's a lot of quality of life in using that belt over using something that would give you, well, more defense or more damage per se. So there's a lot of perks and a lot of options in that end. So as you can see, I'm just casting skeletons every now and then. I don't even bother casting it too often. And that's just to make sure that there are skeletons available on enemies. So that's the Nikos, and we get to the boss. Another perk of this build is that you never have to switch your gems to kill bosses, which is really comfortable as well. And if you put a portal gem in a trigger crafted weapon, you can just switch weapons and immediately switch to just using Dark Pact for an instant cast summon portal, which is very comfortable. Alright, so that's the gameplay footage. Now we're going to talk about the build. I'm going to start with a skill tree. First off, as a witch, you play Necromancer, Bone Barrier, Unnatural Strength, Misses or Sacrifice, pretty generic for a build like this. You spec out through the nodes to go through Deep Wisdom, get HP for Arcanist Dominion, get the life and minion damage to pick up crit, Mystic Bulwark for your spell cap for the blocking. As you can see here, you reach 70% spell block. Watch your side, the best node you want, or the crucial one, is the energy shield gain for each enemy hit while affected by discipline. If you can get something like recovery for energy shield for zealotry.
Welcome to the crew.
Or you can get yourself the Arcane Surge of zealotry. So there's a couple of options if you want the second modifier, but the crucial one is the energy shield while affected by discipline. And then obviously over to HP, pick up Corruption, Death Attunement for the extra Spectre. The Spectres we're using are Frenzy Charge Monkeys to consistently have 3 Frenzy Charges. Go for a Cluster Jewel, Crit, HP, Thread of Hope, so you can pick up Retribution, Precision, Sanctity, Glancing Blows, and Tireless for more HP. Get the Devotion, spec into Spiritual Ace, you actually benefit from all the minion damage you get. And over here we go for Nimbleness, a normal Jewel slot, Melding, and Arcane Expanse, and over to CI, but this one is switched with the Glorious Vanity for the high-blooded version. Go for Doomcast, HP, more crit and more HP into coordination. Now, when it comes to the POB, I'm going to explain the Glorious Vanity here before going into the gear. First off, Glorious Vanity with the souls to Ahuna. Let me show you that in-game as well. Might be a bit easier. Souls to Ahuna, or the sacrifice in the name of Ahuna, wherever the fuck you want to pronounce it, gives you Immortal Ambition. The low-body version will be using a soul tether belt that does the exact same thing, so you don't have to use this jewel. The Immortal Ambition makes it so that your energy shield is down to 0, as you can see down here, and I will always be degenerating energy shield. However, when my life leech applies and I have full HP, that life leech applies to my energy shield, which allows me to 100% of the time always be leeching energy shield. This also allows me to be in a position where I will have that sustained together with the Watcher's Eye Jewel to always have full energy shield on top of the Glancing Blow with all the blocking. This is how you're sustaining your EHP, which in my build currently sits on 6,500-ish. And on top of this, having the Glancing Blow with max blocks approaches and Elusive and Tailwind, all of that shenanigans. It's just absolutely beautiful. However, depending on the numerical value on this Glorious Vanity Jewel, some of these nodes here changes. For example, I have Commanding Presence, I got Legacy of the Vol, Ancient Hex, as well as Commanding Presence here, Cult of Fire, etc., etc. If you get yourself a Glorious Vanity Jewel of Ahuana with Ritual of Shadows, that would be preferable, because this allows you to inflict Withered on hits, which you will do, as based on this build, you're hitting 12 times per second. 0.3, so you have 12 casts per second. And since you're chaining and hitting 6 times, that is 6 times, that's 72 hits per second. Times 30 from your energy shield, that means you're getting about 2,000 energy shield per second with this build. And thanks to the approach of this, that means that you're going to get your 15 Wither stacks much faster than using it with a totem, which the low budget build would be requiring. So there will be a small ramp up time for a low budget build, which this one has as well, but it's much faster than the low budget. This is not mandatory, but if you get one of these, you prefer to have that on one of these nodes that is only 3 points access to get the ritual. Preferably that would be in any of those. The other big pieces of here is obviously the cluster jewel. If you get this, you don't necessarily have to go for a large cluster, which is what Raweon did with his ready post. And a few tweaks that I've done is the additional usage of a large cluster jewel. What's important for the high buddy version to save skill points is to make sure that you put 3 notables on it, and the third notable needs to be a node that you do not ever spec, but that third notable needs to be over here, so otherwise you're going to waste skill points. Otherwise this would cost me 2 more skill points, which you're trying to avoid. The way to determine that is that the mod list on your large cluster jewel, the first node on the cluster will be the one to the left, the second node will be the one up here, the third one node here, which means that you want to have the node you want, the node you don't want, and then the node you want, basically. It's a bit tricky. And I found out that the best way to do that was to purchase a jewel with Touch of Cruelty and Wicked Pole and then augment another Chaos one, because the physical one I added did not end up in that position. So this is a bit tricky if you want to do this build completely min-max. The medium cluster jewels are very simple. You go for Blessed Rebirth and Hulking Corpses. The reason for this is, first off, the minions can't create recently, cannot be damaged. It's crucial for this build to work, otherwise your skeleton's going to die too quickly, and instead of doing damage, you'll be more busy resummoning skeletons. And also it gives you the best HP. Together with Hulking Corpses, that gives you 25% increased life. So you do that on both, because those two are the best life-providing notables. And that's about it. And the last socket, you could go for a small cluster, but for the high buddy version, you want to use jewels like this, which have increased max HP, minions have HP, and then global crit multi for spells, and then a normal global crit multi node. That's basically all your jewels. This is the bad jewel I have in my build, which has minion damage, which gives you less damage with this build than a jewel that gives you minion life. And I do believe that's it for the tree, unless I missed something. Quick glance. Nope, that's about it. So, the gear. The gear. First off, Torrent's Reclamation, like I mentioned before. There are other options, Stygian Vice, Darkness and Throne, whichever you prefer. I think Torrent's Reclamation is, in my opinion, better than Headhunter. And I made a video about this a couple of days ago, or yesterday. Yesterday, I think. And I believe this to be better than Headhunter personally. Obviously, you could use a Headhunter if you want to. I personally think that Torrent's Reclamation is absolutely disgusting. So that's my choice. You can use whatever you want. The weapons will take last. Gloves. You want to make sure that you get a pair of gloves with Hunter base so that you can get minions that have increased max HP as well as an unnerve enemies on hits. This allows you to do more damage on them. Life and resistances. Open up a prefix slot so that you can benchcraft increased damage while it's leeching, because you're always going to be leeching. So that's a crucial point for that one. Boots, for example, they are preferably going to be elusive and tailwind boots. Obviously, for low budget, you don't have to think about these type of rolls. You just go for something with minion life, HP, and resistances, and you're done. And the tier below in damage while leeching craft. I'll go through the low budget in a bit. The boots are same thing there. For low budget, skip the elusive tailwind, just go life and energy shield. Life, movement speed, and resistances, and you're done. For high budget, life, rest, movement speed, elusive tailwind. It's expensive, definitely worth it. The helmet is a bit tricky. For low budget, you want to use +3 level of minion gems and minion life if you can. Squeeze that in, basically by crafting it on a, I think it's Warlord helmet, and just using bound fossils. You don't have to get the minion life, then the helmet becomes even cheaper. You just use a normal helmet or a bone helmet if you want to, and just craft +3 level minion gems. For high budget, however, you want to go with Hunter or Warlord, or just Hunter by skipping the nearby enemies that minus Chaos Rest, which you can put in your AG. The enemy Guardian is using Kingmaker and just HP gear on the rest. I will post a link in the description below for a full in-depth guide on the enemy Guardian and different gear sets. I am using Kingmaker on him with Mask of the Stitch Demon, so a video for that is in the description below. So the other mods for an optimized high-budget build for Dark Pact for Helmet would be Hunter Warlord, where you get +3 level minion gems, tier 1 roll of minion life, also having crit multi on the suffix, a high life roll, and maximum power charges, and also applying nearby enemies have -9% chaos resistance. But like I mentioned, you can have that mod, the chaos resistance, on your Guardian instead, and then open up a resistance slot to have less of a hassle trying to sort your resistances on the build. The amulet, high dexterity to cover that, allocating command of steel for more damage and block. Make sure you have crit multi, HP, life, resistances, and most importantly on a hunter base, chaos damage leeches life, which is very easy to craft in the Harvest League. Open a prefix slot for damage while leeching, catalyze it with life and mana that scales the damage as well as your life amount that you get from it, as well as the leeching. And that's pretty much it with the amulet. Piss easy to craft. The chest. The chest. The chest is a bit tricky because you want to have additional curse. Explode is a bit questionable. You don't need it. I like using it, so you want to have additional curse, power charge on crit, which is obviously, this is nothing you want to use on the low budget build. On a low budget, you simply skip all of this and you use a tabula if you want to. For high budget, you want to have this. So what you do is you Woke Orb, Crusader, and Hunter, and then you in Harvest League you guarantee the explode craft by blocking all the physical mods, by augmenting the physicals to get yourself the crit ones, remove the mods again, but the thing is you don't get the additional curse if you do that. So the only way to get this in a proper, reliable way is to Woke Orb, additional curse, as well as a Crusader explode chest together, and pray that you get a prefix you can remove to get the life as extra energy shield because the build is hybrid, and then you can reroll the suffixes with Reforge, keeping prefixes crafts, so that you have an open suffix for crafting in terms of resistances. And you basically augment crit to guarantee the power charge on crit, and you can augment caster before that to guarantee the spell crit, because the spell crit is the only caster mod this can roll, so you can just re-roll cast until you get a tier 1. It cost me about 10 exalted to finish this chest piece, so it's very, very cheap to do. The rings are a bit trickier. I found it to be easier to purchase a ring with Despair on Hit Curse, and then harvest craft the remaining mods. In this case, I would open a prefix for increased damage, and then I would have resistances and life and energy shield, so it's not very hard to craft. The Shaper ring was very annoying to craft. I did the same thing there with making sure I got myself a base ring with a level 12 Assassin Mark on hit. And then the nuisance started. I started with blocking all the prefixes, and then I would augment caster and reroll caster mod till I hit spell damage tier 1. And then, because the cast speed is only one mod, once I got the tier 1 spell damage, I would augment caster, which guarantees the cast speed. So that sorts the suffixes. For the prefixes, I would start with augmenting caster, and I hit life gain on life gain for each enemy hit by your spells. It doesn't matter if it's tier 1 or 2 because you're going to sustain yourself so well anyways. And then augment life again for the life, and then you'd have to do remove add life till you get decent life tier. And you want to make sure that you have the life gain on hit, and then I just bench crafted energy shield on it. However, I don't really need it. If I want more damage, I can remove that and do increased damage craft instead if I want to. So, Bottle Faith be used in this as well. Before we go through the gems, I'm going to explain the weapons. So, the weapons are generic +2 minion weapons. The problem with these is that we're also going for spell damage since we are doing the damage and not our minions. So what I did was I got myself weapons, convoking ones of proper item level, and I fractured them to get the T1 spell damage there. And then I would do the 4 fossil craft for the +2, which means that you go with Shuddering, Corroded, Jagged, Metallic Fossil till I get +2. And then if I needed to, I would purge the remaining suffixes if I couldn't deterministically remove them. And what I did after this, I would benchcraft a local crit chance, and then I would augment crit and pray I got a good tier crit multi. And if I didn't, I would then remove the local crit, and I would craft cannot roll caster mod, which means that if I do remove add crit, I would only re-roll between crit multi and local crit chance till I got a good crit multi. After that, I would remove the bench craft, and I would I would block craft with crit spell crit, and then I would augment caster, which would give me a cast speed guaranteed. If I then get a bad tier of cast speed, I would then have to bench craft with prefixes cannot be changed, and then do remove/augment caster mod, which would re-roll the cast speed into cast speed or crit to spells. And I would repeat that process till I get a tier I would be happy with, and then I would remove the bench and put the trigger. Similar process on this. However, since we don't need a secondary trigger on this, what I would do is I would do the exact same process for the crit multi, and then I would augment caster, and if I would then get either crit or spell cast speed, and at that point I basically would have to see what I get and see if I get a tier 2 crit to spells or tier 2 cast speed, I would just bench craft the other one. I got myself a tier 1 crit to spells, and then I would bench craft the cast speed instead. So that's the process on the crafting. So over to the gems, which is pretty straightforward as well. In the trigger weapon, you want to use Convocation, Desecrate, and Bone Offering. Now the Convocation is a matter of personal taste. You don't really need it. That's mainly for the Guardian and the Spectres because it doesn't work on the Skeletons. And Desecrate to generate your Bone Offering for the block chance. The other weapon is the Standardized Wither Spell Totem Multi-Totem, just to help you speed up the Withers on bosses. For the low body build, this is your only way of applying Wither, whereas this is just an additional Wither application for the higher body version. My helmet for the Skeletons, because it's +3 level minion gems, I would have Skeletons, Empower, Minion Life, and Feeding Frenzy, as I explained what I would do in the clearing. The other piece would be Discipline and Zealotry, and then we'd have Arcane Surge and Flame Dash. Those two needs to be linked though. And in the boots, I'm using Animate Guardian, Blood Magic, Meat Shield, and Spectres, because we're using the Act 7 Carnage Chieftain for the Frenzy Charge Monkeys, 3 of these. And then the last links is the Dark Pact. So I'm using Dark Pact with Awakened Spell Echo, with Intensify, Awakened Control Instructions, Awakened Void Manipulation, and Awakened Chain. This is to create a situation where the Dark Pact chains 6 times per cast, allowing us to hit over 70 times per second, and that's basically it. That's the high body version. So I'm going to go through the low body version for you boys as well. I'm having a lot of fun with this build. We've been delving a little bit lately in today's stream, and it's just been beautiful to do. Crafting all the items took quite some time, but we've had a good time doing it. I would recommend buying most of the things though, because it would just be less of a headache to do. In the tree for the low budget version, we are skipping the Glorious Vanity. We're simply taking the nodes over and doing the same thing on the tree that we did on the high budget over here, except for this part. On the other side of the tree, we are not using a large cluster to keep the cost down, and instead using the shittiest version of a medium cluster with 6 passive, which obviously wastes 1 point. I'm pretty sure you can get a 5 passive to not waste a point, and it would still be pretty cheap. With Blessed Rebirth and Hulking Corpses, because of the mandatory requirement of Blessed Rebirth for the build to function in a proper way. we're not using Thread of Hope to, again, keep the budget down, and we're instead speccing into Glancing Blows and the Tireless. This build is finished at level 85, so plenty of nodes so you can pick up for more HP, such as these 2 life nodes over here. You can go for more life nodes if you want to in Barbarism. You can get more HP by basically speccing down here for Blood Drinkers. So there's a lot of options for you to play around with those remaining points, or just simply get more jewels, or perhaps prepare yourself for a high budget transition. The other mandatory item for this build in low budget is to use a Soul Tether. And the addition in the POB for the chain damage is because the every cast is doing 6 times the damage, or in the high budget it's more 500% more damage, but in the low budget it's 400, because the Lynx is obviously not using any sort of awakened gems. It's just a normal chain gem, which is +2. The support gems are exactly the same, or all the gems are exactly the same, except we're in the skeletons we're using a level 3 empower rather than level 4. Just use whatever empower gems you have. If you don't have any, just save your currency and buy that later. It's not a big deal. Basically the Guardian that I've implemented into this build is in an unset ring for this version, and it's optional. That's why I put it as an unset ring, because you don't have to do this for low budget if you don't feel like it. And the video in the description below for the Enemy Guardian shows you how you can do the Enemy Guardian in a low budget state. So the only mandatory items is basically the Cluster Jewel for Blessed Rebirth and Soul Tether. Everything else is literally whatever you can get your hands on. If you get a decent spell damage with a little bit of crit and +1 to spell or minion skills, benchcraft trigger on it, you got a really good weapon. And the other weapon just needs to have, like, if you can find some crit multi, maybe crit chance and a decent amount of spell damage, these weapons are super cheap to get. You can basically do these, well, you can do these soul self-found. The helmet, all you have to do is get a helmet that you roll +3 minion gems on, and you're done with that one. Cherubim is a nice option. You can use Tabula if you want to, or any other chest piece you want to, because it really doesn't matter for the low budget version. Like I mentioned with the gloves, do the cheaper version of the increased damage whilst leeching, life and energy shield on a pair of gloves. Don't even need to have minion life, don't need to have unnerved, don't have to have an influenced item on it. Same thing with the boots, just life and energy shield with the movement speed. The amulet would preferably be a hunter base, so you can get the chaos damage leeches life. Craft the cheaper version of damage whilst you leeching. With dexterity, life and energy shield. The ring doesn't really have to have the chaos damage leeches life, because you get that from the amulet. Just life and energy shield. The ring with Assassin's Mark is preferable, not mandatory, but it is preferable to get an Assassin's Mark on hit ring. The skill that I've added in the low budget version is to make sure that you apply Orb of Storms with a Peacock one way or another, which I've done here instead of the Animate Guardian. Just add this. Basically, what we do for bosses is put down an Orb of Storms with power charge and crit, so that you can get yourself power charges whilst you're clearing, but most importantly versus bosses, to keep that damage up and running. So this is the low budget version, solo self-found viable, and with this DPS on skeletons, the skeletons has about 23,000 HP, and that means you're doing about 5 million Shaper DPS when you're leveled 85 in absolute trash gear, whereas the high budget build is doing 111 million Shaper DPS with the gear I'm using. So a bit over 100 million on the high budget version. So I'm not going to postpone or drag on with this video. That's basically all I have to show you with this build. A big shout out to Raweon. I've been talking to him whilst we were optimizing this build. He was the one who brought the inspiration on the Reddit post. A big shout out to him for bringing this idea to the community. And he was very happy with the low budget version we just showed you here. So I feel good. I feel good about this. So for those of you guys trying out this build, hope you guys have fun with it. And make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more content. Until next time, boys. Stay safe. Keep rocking.